Hi, Dr. Ruby Payne, and we're going to talk about Chapter 4 of Emotional Poverty Book 1. And this chapter is about how environments create less than and separate experiences for students, and then what that does as they begin to negotiate school safety. This is a larger frame now about individual safety, but more than that is school safety. And one of the things we know is that when the environments promote less than and separate from situations, then that prompts a whole lot of behavior that we don't want. And so we're going to look at how that happens. And this chapter has many case studies in it about situations. And one in particular is a case study that involves death of a parent. What I want to say about death of a parent, and the reason I'm bringing this up is because of COVID. Whenever you are a child and you have a death of a parent or someone you love close to you, an adult, that is unexpected or not supposed to happen because they're not old, okay? The bottom line is that it impacts, Virginia Satir says, it impacts them even more than when they were alive, because then people make decisions based upon the fact, well, my dad died when I was 45, and you know what? I'll probably die when I'm 45, so it doesn't really matter what I do, that kind of thing. So we look at situations, racism, sexism, death, foster care, moving a lot, second language. There's a case study for each of those, and at the end of each case study, it looks at comments that you can make that will make the child feel stronger, build a strong inner self, comments that made to make them feel weaker on their inner self. One of the case studies in there about death is that one of my consultants' mother died between his 6th and 7th grade year. And he went to school at the beginning of 7th grade. So she died in childbirth, and what happened then, his father started drinking. So literally, he lost both parents. And there was a grandmother in the picture. But one of the things that happened, the first day of 7th grade, he went in, and the teacher had no way of knowing this happened over the summer. But it was algebra, and he wasn't interested in math, and he was still angry over the death of his mother. And he didn't do anything. He just sat there. And the teacher said to him, if you don't fill in this paper that I gave you to fill in, I'm going to call your mother. Well, he said, if you can blanking talk to her, I'd like to talk to her too. Whereupon he got kicked out of class. When he came back, he had to apologize to the teacher. And he apologized to her. She had since found out what happened. And she said, well, I know just how you feel. He said, oh, your mother died too? She said, oh, no, she's fine. And it so infuriated him, he did no work in that class all year. So part of the issue is, how do we deal with that? What kinds of things could have been said or done that would have changed that outcome? Now, that leads then to building safety. And in your book on page 160, in your book on page 60, there is a chart there that I want to go over with you, because I want to look at a progression that happens emotionally when students get to the point of violence, either to themselves or others. And in this chart, you will see in your book, you will see what happens here as they go through this progression, okay? First thing that happens is there's some sort of external environment that triggers you. You're less than or separate from. Well, if your brain is not regulated, not integrated, if your emotional self is weak, okay, and your bonding and attachment is insecure, then you're going to be afraid, okay, and because it jeopardizes safety or belonging, okay. If that moves on, that separate or less than experience moves on, and it becomes criticism, then there's guilt. Because criticism is about the behavior. Guilt is about what you do. So we might say to a student, don't run in the hall. That's criticism. That's guilt. But if it goes to contempt, Contempt is about the person. So in other words, if it goes to you're no good because you ran in the hall, then that's shame. If it goes from contempt to humiliation, betrayal, okay, betrayal, separation, then that's humiliation, okay? And what happens is there's a betrayal, it's separation, it's humiliation, because you basically lost safety and belonging, and you were shamed on top of it. But if it happens the last step in front of lots of people, then it may lead to revenge and violence and rage. And that's where the damage is. And what we know, FBI has said that 93% of the time when there's been a mass shooting, it's because there has been a loss or perceived loss. FBI will tell you there's no one profile that fits all of them, but there is this concept of loss or perceived loss. I had a middle school principal tell me this recently. He had in his campus, he found out that he had a 7th grade teacher who was one day a week, was picking out one student in each class, having all the other students in that class go around and say what was wrong with that one student or why they didn't like him. And the principal was absolutely appalled, because what he understood is it made his building, the whole building, less safe, because not only was the person who had that experience humiliated, and it was very public, well, the other thing that happened was that he also understood is that it made everybody else feel less safe in that building. So FBI will tell you that the safety and belonging in a campus, the emotional well-being in a campus, is the biggest way to prevent violence. So if you go now in your book on page 84 and 85, there is a technique that I'm going to recommend to you that you might consider using in your building called emotional triage. We are really careful, and we're very, comfortable with the idea of academic triage. We have the bubble kids and all the other things we triage, okay, subgroups, etc. But emotional triage, we just really haven't thought about the need to do that. And what I'm going to recommend, and especially now that we're in COVID, what I recommend is that you have each staff member, okay, supply on that chart on page 84 a list of names, okay? Who are the students who are loners, okay? Who you can't find. You don't know where they are, okay? What are their names? Who are the ones that are anxious all the time, okay? And then who are the ones who are safe and dangerous? And what you want then is to look at the top 50% of those students and decide who's most unstable. You get a committee together. Don't let one person do it. Get a committee together and identify who you have to watch most closely. And then one of the things you want to do, particularly if you're online right now, is you want to make sure that somebody makes a daily contact with that kid, okay? And the second thing you want to do, and make sure that you do, is that you have some way of keeping track on a daily basis, either a contact, a 3 or 4 minute conversation about the well-being of that student. If you're at a campus, then you assign somebody to talk to them every day, one-on-one, because what you're finding out. And there are 3 questions I recommend to you to ask. Number 1, who do you care the most about, and who cares the most about you? What you're listening for is an adult. If they don't have an adult, they're at risk. And then number 2, how much sleep do they get? Because one of the things we know is if you don't get at least 8 hours of sleep a night, then it impacts your emotional health, leads to depression, and a lot of other kinds of emotional issues. Chapter 4. Thank you for joining me.